Hey, what's up, guys? So, what's on the headlines this morning in this pre workout preaching session? Well, something which has kind of, you know, caught sail in the wind is this whole Starbucks deal that's going down where there were two African American individuals that got arrested in a Starbucks. Now, obviously the story itself is kind of being diluted so that the proper picture can be painted to fit the agenda of those that are spreading the story itself, right? Because as I've heard more and more and more about what's actually happened, it makes a little more sense as to why it happened. Now, when I first heard the story, and heard the reasoning as to why these gentlemen were arrested, it was because they were in the coffee shop and hadn't purchased anything. Now, I myself have spent many hours in coffee shops and Starbucks, in fact, without actually purchasing anything. And I kind of feel like that's the mood within a lot of these places. It's kind of like a get together, a hangout. You can go there, you can write. It's like a safe place for people to intellectually collect and to mingle among those whom are pursuing similar interests without necessarily being confined to the borders and boundaries of an educational system or like a school itself. You can kind of go there and you can, bounce ideas off each other, and you can draw, you can write, you can do all this other stuff. You can go there and work. And I've done this many times without actually purchasing anything in the shop, especially when I was very low on funds and I couldn't actually afford to, and I had nowhere else to go, and I didn't want to go to the library because that was just, too clean. And it's almost like it was so clean that it's like sterile and dead, and it's hard to find inspiration in a place like that. So I would go somewhere a little more lively, and that would be a place like Starbucks. Now, as I hear the story more and more and more, it sounds like they were actually warned by the manager and told, hey, you guys need to depart the premises, because it sounds like they had been there for, an extended period of time. And what you have to realize is that there's a lot of people that are on edge in society. And, I don't necessarily think that this is a race issue, but it's an issue of the news and media keeping everybody on edge. Because, the only thing that makes the news headlines is all the tragic events which befall the nation. Disregarding the other 7 billion people on the planet and everything good and positive that happens. They know what brings in the controversy and brings in the money into their wallets, and they put up ads all over the news stories and make a profit off of drawing people in through controversy, because that's what draws people in. If people knew they could just walk outside and see the world for themselves and see the beauty, without getting their morning dose of controversy, which keeps them on edge and keeps them going, so to speak, keeps them away from peace and comfort, and kind of pushes them forward with a wolf chasing them from behind, then everybody wouldn't be so on edge. Now, I myself have personally been asked by individuals to leave the premises because obviously the people on the premises that were managing the facility didn't necessarily like, me being there. Honestly, I wasn't doing anything bad either. It was just like these people, like I'm just a really creative individual. I am a person who tries to find ways to do things which kind of breaks the normal behaviors of people, with obviously trying to keep myself in check and recognizing the fact that you can easily get in trouble by being counterculture to an extreme, to a certain degree. Obviously, the normal behaviors of culture are something which came about due to their effectiveness within society, and for society to proliferate and be a successful entity and thing, obviously these behaviors need to be kept in check. And so I go in there and into these places with all of that in mind. Now, that being said, there have been times where, obviously I've been going and doing things, and I was kind of very vocal against certain individuals and people, and very outspoken and opinionated. And, I obviously stood out in regards to everybody else in the facilities and in the location, and I was asked to leave, and I was told that if I didn't leave, then, they would bring in law enforcement. And obviously they brought in law enforcement, and I had to go down this whole road of going through the whole process, paying lots of money, which is pretty much what everybody wants. They don't really care, because as soon as I told the story to the judge just like rolled, their eyes at me and was just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And yeah. So I've been through that whole situation, that whole thing, and my story wasn't broadcast all over the news and whatever have you, and painted in a certain light to portray an image which reflects somebody's agenda, because obviously we hear more and more about this story. These gentlemen were asked to leave because obviously the manager's put on edge. There's these two people he doesn't know or recognize that are sitting in there forever. We don't know what their activities were. We're told they were just sitting there, but if somebody's sitting there for a couple hours and then they tell you they're waiting for somebody, like, you guys are sitting here waiting for a couple hours, you never know. Like, we don't know. And I'm painting the manager in a position of obviously creating a space, an environment which is welcoming to the consumers and the other customers in the area. He has to keep all of this in mind. It's not just, something where it's privileged for a couple individuals. He has to keep a huge, broad, people in mind which are coming to his facility and location. And so if these individuals, it just said on the latest news report, they were asked to leave, otherwise the cops would be called, and they didn't. They did the same thing I did. They said, well, call the cops, because I'm obviously not going to listen to you, because I have a problem with authority and I have a problem with you, and so you can call the cops, and then I'll sit here and I will be antagonistic towards the police force as well, because I also have a problem with them, right? And so really, where is the issue here? And the more and more that we hear about this story, why is it that different stories about this story hold different forms of information, and they paint almost a complete picture to a certain degree while still maintaining the picture which fits their agenda? Anyways, I'm gonna go and hit the gym now. Everybody, peace out. Welcome to the post-workout portion of the preaching session, and I'll begin where it is that I left off. Now, when life's not working out in your favor, it's easy to go against the way of things, to take rash action, to somehow, hope that in participating and partaking in behavior, which is extreme, you can find yourself in a better situation, in a better place, maybe with the hopes of creating a better place for somebody to come after you that is in a similar situation to you are. I understand that. I get that, because I've been there. I've been through all of that stuff. And at some points in time, life is very frustrating, because it's like playing a video game where you're restricted from certain movements or behaviors within the game, but then you say, this is stupid. Obviously, I could do this in real life. Why am I being restricted? The video game restricts you from participating in behaviors. And obviously you can get around this by, injecting certain lines of code and altering the game itself. And some points in time, I'm just like, this is life. I'm meant to experience it. I'm meant to be and enjoy and love and have wealth and have success and have comfort, to work hard. And so it's very frustrating when all of a sudden there's something that presents itself before you and you're told that you can't take advantage of it. I recall an instance way back when I was just starting and entered into college, and I found myself being back in my hometown with a bunch of my friends that I grew up with, and we climbed up on top of a government facility, and we sat atop this building, and we reminisced about the good times that we had with each other, and how we were moving on in our life and everything to that extent. And then the next thing I'm in the clinker, I'm in the big house, and I'm getting fingerprints taken and all this other stuff, and it's just like, well, shit. You know what I mean? And obviously, to a certain degree, I wouldn't be being arrested for these minor incidents if there wasn't necessarily a bigger issue at play here. I mean, one could say that, some of the most notorious outlaws in the past weren't necessarily arrested for the worst things that they participated in, but for minor things, which, tripped them up, so to speak. And so to say that somebody who is arrested for something very minor doesn't necessarily mean that there's a bigger warrant for their arrest, so to speak. Now, I myself have found myself in a number of precarious situations where I have felt very frustrated and I wanted to live my life a certain way. And the majority of people around me were not supportive of my behavior. And so I got spanked pretty hard by local authorities, by personages that were representing certain business interests. I've been arrested twice in Georgia, one for urban camping, where I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to go and kind of trek across the country and, learn from people and possibly teach people some things. And obviously I was representing some certain individuals in a negative light, and they didn't necessarily like that. And so, they kind of took advantage of me slipping up in a very minor way, and I ended up in a very, very bad situation. And then later on, the whole thing just put my back against the wall. And I ended up saying, there's a mountain over there, and it was a national park. And I was like, fuck that, the system says I have to go and work, and I have to expend a certain type of energy to gain entrance to this place that I want to be at. And so I climbed over the fence and was walking around the national park, just, climbing this mountain and everything like that. And anyways, got arrested again. And this time, my consequences were fairly severe, and it put my back in and against a very difficult wall that, I felt I couldn't back away from, and I was backed into a corner. And I don't think there's a more dangerous position you can put somebody in. A lot of people say that nuclear warfare is kind of like the weapon to end all war, but in essence, I think that it actually breeds a worse war, because then it puts people's backs up against the wall where they say, fuck it, I have nothing to lose. The world's gonna fucking end anyways if shit doesn't go right, and I'm in a shitty position to begin with, so who gives a fuck? And so they're willing to fight even harder for what it is that they want, because their back is against a wall. They're in between two hard places, a rock and a hard place, as the old adage goes. And then so from that event, I found myself obviously in contention with the belief systems that other people's had. And all of a sudden I felt myself being judged and critiqued by people that I felt had very flawed ways of living. And they held beliefs very true to themselves that I thought was very irrational, illogical. And I sat there and tried to explain to them their flaw and, attacked their belief system, trying to say, hey, look at you, you idiot. You're over here calling me an idiot? Well, look at you. You know what I mean? And obviously it does not help at all in that situation. And then I try and, come to some philosophical agreement about existence and life itself, what really is law and regulation, and what is ethical and moral law in regards to culture, and how culture itself plays into what we actually see morally fit within society. And if we disregard the culture and we look into the past and look forward into the future, we see that what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're restraining ourselves to isn't necessarily some universal truth through all time that transcends, this period. It's something restricted to this period. And, this whole event led me down into a road where all of a sudden I'm in trouble with the law a lot. And I go back home, I make my way back home, and all of a sudden I'm like, fuck everything, I'm going to do things my way. And so, I get in trouble at a local gym that I've been going to since like high school. Periodically, I go there, and I've been going there for a longer amount of time than the managers that had been at the place. And, recently I had really gotten into writing in journals. And I had this journal that had black paper, and it was like my favorite journal. And I had a white ink pen that I would write on this black paper with. I thought it was really cool because it was something that I didn't see a lot, you know what I mean? And so I carried this pen around with me all the time. And I went there and signed a new contract with the facility, and I wrote out the entire contract with my white ink pen. And I thought it was neat. It was like you looked at it at a certain angle with the light, and then you could read it and see it and everything like that. Well, you know, the manager thought it was very fishy that I was doing this, and maybe it was a telltale sign of some behaviors which obviously, would bubble out and become something greater inevitably. And so he took charge right then and told me to leave. And I said, this is bogus. Like, I'm demanding that you guys, kind of let me stay here. And I sat there and argued with him. And then I started attacking this guy personally. And I was like, dude, I've been going here longer than you have worked here. I know people here that you don't even know that have been going here since this place opened up and stuff like that. And obviously, the guy says he's going to call the cops, and then I leave, and then I kind of like dilly-daddle for a little bit, and then I actually just kind of walked into the facility and started exercising and, just saying, fuck you. And the next thing I know, the cops show up, and then I'm arrested, and, I'm in jail for a whole week, and then go and see the judge, and it's like, well, shit, yeah, this is kind of retarded, and they're just like, pay us a lot of money, and then you can get out, and I'm just like, all right, whatever, fuck that. And then, later on, I'm just like, well, shit, I think all these laws now are fucking stupid, because at what point in time does spanking somebody for them participating in behaviors that you do not approve of actually forward them to saying, like, fuck you even further? So, the next thing I got in trouble for big time was I started making home-brewed wine, right? Like, my family has a lot of, I guess, vegetation on the property and other things to that extent. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna, bottle my own brew. And then I started going around and selling it to people and stuff like that. And it was actually a very good product. Got high marks and high reviews by the local community. Well, at least some of the portion of the community, because obviously there was a portion of the community that thought my behavior was getting out of hand and thought that I needed to be spanked very, very hard. And this is the worst situation that I've ever been in my life, because this will be the 4th time that I was arrested. And it was a very shitty situation where all of a sudden I had to have behavioral correction and monitoring, and it looked like I was never going to make my way out of this facility. And I'll tell you what, those facilities are pretty fucked up. When you see how they treat some of these individuals and you see the judgment that they have and the way that they view life, I honestly look back at that situation and almost cry, because I know some of those people that were in that place are never gonna fucking make it out. And I don't necessarily think it's the fault of these individuals that are in this location, because a lot of times it's these institutions which are causing the problems that they hold you there for. It's ironic, to say the least, when you're trying to get a good night's rest and they come in and they demoralize you and they keep you from getting good rest by flashing you with flashlights every 15 minutes and coming over and disturbing you and taking away all of your personal possessions, not even allowing you the simplest of freedoms in any way, shape, or form, forgetting the fact that anybody could fall and die from a number of things within the facility could be utilized as weapons and all this other shit. And it's like, they're just causing all these issues to keep these people there. And a lot of these people have no support outside the facility at all. And when they're not setting up places for people to be reintroduced into society in a beneficial and positive way, not only for society, but for themselves, they're the ones causing the problems, which they feed off of through this loop of sucking people dry of money and funds that they cannot pay for. Otherwise, why would they be in this situation and place? And then they're stuck in this infinite cycle of never being able to pay for any of these goods and get out of this place. And it's a hellhole. And it's a very dire and drastic problem. I remember having a conversation with somebody else that was there, and I was like, dude, you just got to find the freedom while you're here. And they make it fucking impossible pretty much, because, a lot of these places are like day camp to a certain extent. If you've ever been to like scout camp, jail's kind of like that. It's like... it's funny to say that, but that's actually what it's very similar to, is like week-long scout camp. You know what I mean? You're like in there with a group of these people that kind of become your homies, and it's just weird. You got to make the best of it, but you got to find the freedom, and they make it pretty fucking hard, because obviously it's like people are pissed at you, otherwise you wouldn't be there. And so it's like they're obviously trying to punish you, right? And so they have this whole negative emotion. And so they have this whole negative emotion that they're expressing at you. And so obviously it's fucking hard to find the positives in a place like this. And I told this kid once after I did a little yoga session with him, and I was like, just breathe, dude. We have all the fresh air we can breathe, you know what I mean? And that's even pretty fucking hard. And the place is fucking cold, and you can't fucking, lay in bed. You're being drained emotionally and physically, and you have to go and participate in a lot of this other shit. And all of a sudden, if, you pass out and are laying on the floor and you can't lay on the couches and all this other shit, it's seen as, behavioral problems, and it just complexifies your situation there, and you don't want to participate. It's seen as another behavioral problem, and you're tired and all this other shit, and you're getting sick because there's a lot of fucking illness that's going around in the facility. And then I'm just like, dude, we still have freedom. And I'm like trying desperately to, find freedom in all this. We can choose whether or not to make our beds in the morning and all this other stuff. And I was like, we have as much paper as we want. We're free to express ourselves on this paper. And so I was drawing like flowers like all day long and everything like that. And, it's fucking hard because you're trying to deal with all this shit that's going on around you and trying to get the fuck out. But then everything that you do to deal with it, and the fact that the place actually presents problems in creating problems that they're trying to, in fact, say are the problems that are keeping you there, makes it pretty fucking hard. And maybe to a certain degree, the ability that I was actually able to get out of these facilities and locations was just further evidence and proof that I myself had been wronged in being forcefully taken and placed in a position such as this. Maybe the ability to get out is in fact showcasing that you yourself do not belong there. And it's like, you look at these people and they have the worst case of illness. And I'm not talking about the people in the facility. I'm talking about the management of the facility, because they're sitting there diagnosing all these individuals. And I say, why don't you diagnose life? Why don't you look at astral birth? Why don't you look at all this natural cause of things and see how the world really fucking works? And why don't you see the color in it rather than the black and white? And why don't you say that he has a colorful personality rather than all of a sudden diagnosing him with some obviously negatively toned illness? When I think those that look out and see ill people really have the fucking illness, right? And I obviously have a very strong emotional connection with people that are sitting there diagnosing and psychologically analyzing people, because I think they're fucked up. And I think that the system doesn't really help those individuals. You know how many times I was actually prompted towards, like somewhere where I could be helped financially and possibly get a job and get myself off the streets and all this other stuff? Not once. I was pinned in a corner and fucking wasn't listened to at all. And obviously everybody has their assumptions when you come into a place, and it's fucking a nightmare, right? And eventually I finally got through to somebody, and they fucking helped me out of that place because they realized that it was fucked up what was going on. And so yeah, at what point in time is the system actually participating in worse behaviors than what they themselves are regulating the system with? Or they're judging me for behaviors that they do not approve of, but hypocritically are participating in worse behaviors themselves, is a better way to say it. So now, obviously, this whole thing goes back into stereotype. And then obviously, within regards to the system itself, I have a stereotype now. But that's not taking into consideration the other 26 years of my life. These are 4 incidents. And I say 4 incidents because the first one that I spoke of, where I was on top of a government-owned facility, got expunged from my record, right? So if local law enforcement is viewing my record, they're not going to see that. Ended up having to do like 36 hours of charity work where I built toys for tots and suffered inhalation of very harmful materials for an extended and prolonged period of time for the well-being of children around the world. But that's no longer on my government record. But it's on my personal record for sure if I'm reciting my own personal history in regards to major events in my life and turning points which shaped me into who I am today. But that's why I am referencing to the 4 major events where these obviously will still be showcased on my governmental historical record. Right? How many other incidents in a positive light and in a positive way have I affected society and the world? They don't take into consideration the multitudes of charitable events that I have taken part and place in. I was in Scouts my entire life. I was in 4-H my entire life. Pretty much every month, I was participating in some charitable event. Youth church programs, I was participating in charitable events every single month. I ran a lot of those events. I put together a lot of those events. I was pre-med for a long time. I was going through this whole endeavor of being somebody which would help heal individuals. You know how many low-income clinics I spent time at? You know how many donations I put together for people in need? And obviously I got the fuck out of that whole way of life because I saw how unfitting it was for an experience of life, and obviously it wasn't helping heal people. So, why when somebody looks at my record is the 4 things that we see the negative things about me, or what's deemed to be negative by those in charge? Why don't we see, the hundreds of other positive things, major positive things that I've done? All of the, athletic clubs that I have sponsored and that I have participated in, that I have coached. Like, none of that stuff is shown or seen. What about all of the scientific and academic accolades that I have received and that I have promoted in a society where certain individuals' pretty much rights were taken away? And all of a sudden, their whole society is experiencing a very negative aspect of life based upon the actions of those previous to our time. Where I myself am trying to forward scientific advancement in a certain field. And that field was specifically nutritional genetics. I was a genetics researcher in a serious and professional laboratory. No joke. I've done a lot of different shit in my life. And, obviously I am painting a very clean and beautiful picture and image of myself at this moment about all of the positive things that I have done. I've visited very poor communities and spent the entirety of my time there helping out local individuals to find a way to get themselves out of this situation. A thing in which when I myself was in a very fucked up situation, not a lot of people fucking tried to help me out of that situation by actually talking to me and by actually saying, here are your options. Here's a bunch of places you can go. Here's a bunch of things that you can do to get yourself out of this situation, to build up some form of currency in the society that we live so that you yourself can live a life. Nobody tried to fucking help me out when I was in a pretty fucked up place. Not once was I fucking told any of this shit about how to get out of this place. I had to fucking fight. And it was a fucking chess match between these fuckers. And it was pretty fucked up. So you can see why I myself have a pretty fucked up picture in regards to a lot of different aspects of life. And maybe when I talk about the Starbucks thing, I should be taking the side that I wasn't taking earlier in this actual vlog here. And that also being said, I think that it's very easy to make something a thing of race when originally it was not. And that's very easy to do, just make it a thing of race. But, there's a lot of shit that I'm not going to tell you guys about my life. Like I said, usually the fucking people that get caught for shit get caught for stupid shit that they tripped up on. You know what I mean? So obviously there's not a lot of shit that you're seeing about me. And I think that's with every fucking person on this planet. And it's hard. It's fucking hard when we historically look at the greatest figures that have ever existed, that their names lived on. And all of a sudden they're painted in this picture. And a lot of times they're pretty fucked up people. And does the end truly justify their means, so to speak? And when I'm reading about these great historical figures, it's hard for me not to say, well, what the fuck am I doing? And then all of a sudden we have these, great figures living among us today in our society. And they're obviously painting a picture about themselves. And, how are they going to be seen 100 years from now? Are they going to be seen in the same light where obviously, their marketing campaign has a lot to do with how they're going to be seen later on? Just like the whole battle we have of ancient discoverers where, the old adage goes, he had a better publicist, but obviously he wasn't necessarily the first or the greatest. Who the fuck today is going to be a great figure tomorrow, but there's a lot of shit that we don't know about them? I think that's just fucking life, and we're all trying to fucking wander around and have the best life possible. And when shit's not working out our way, we're going to take rash action to try and somehow fight our way out of this pit of hell that we're in. And, all I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot with the story that we're probably not seeing. But with stereotyping people, there's a lot of good that you don't see as well. Obviously, when people are going to be looking at my history, they're going to be seeing these 4 major prominent events, most possibly. And they're possibly going to neglect, the thousands. And I can say that confidently. Like, it's no joke. Like, a lot of different shit. A lot of shit where I've gone out and gone above and beyond what the normal average person does in regards to charity and well-being towards the environment and towards other people and individuals. And then when shit's not working out my way and all of a sudden I'm being judged by people which obviously have, in my own opinion, a very fucking stupid belief system, and then they're sitting there judging me, and then I point out the flaws in their life and in their way of thinking, but then they still have the power over me and say that my way of thinking is incorrect. Obviously, I'm going to get pretty fucking pissed off. And I'm going to say, you know what, to hell with all this shit. It's do or fucking die here. And life is a fucking battle. And to say that it's all fucking happy and go lucky is not fucking true at all. It's a fucking battle out there. People are doing business deals. Business is fucking ruthless. People are fucking dying. They're fucking starving. Money is literally just a metaphoric expression of our own personal energy. And it's hard not to fucking go against the way that things are when things aren't fucking working out in your way. But it doesn't take a brainiac to see that those in power are obviously going to set up the rules and regulations to maintain their position of power. Just because somebody can see the flaws in what it is that they're doing or have done, it doesn't necessarily justify what they've done or what they're doing. Obviously, a change in behavior or action is truly the only way to reprimand the situation. Just saying and identifying the fact that you're obviously observant about what it is that's going on or what has happened or occurred, that doesn't necessarily give you freedom to do it. All right, everybody. That's enough from my end. I'll see y'all next time.